My older brother stood in the doorway of my small rental apartment, looking around with barely concealed disgust. "You're 32 years old and still renting," he said, shaking his head. "That's honestly pathetic. I bought my first house when I was 25. You're never going to build wealth by throwing money away on rent." I didn't respond. I just nodded and let him keep talking. He had no idea that the small rental apartment he was mocking was one of 1,200 units I owned across the country. He didn't know that my real estate portfolio was valued at $750 million. He didn't know that I owned the building we were standing in, along with 43 others in the city. My brother Damien had spent our entire lives treating me like a failure. He was the golden child, the successful one, the son my parents were proud of. I was the dreamer, the risk-taker, the disappointment. At every family gathering, Damien made sure everyone knew about his accomplishments while subtly putting me down. And I let him, because I'd learned something valuable in business. Let people underestimate you. It's the greatest advantage you can have. This is the story of how my brother discovered the truth. Growing up, Damien was always the favored child. He was 3 years older than me, smarter in school, better at sports, more popular with friends. My parents adored him. Everything he did was celebrated. Every achievement was met with pride and praise. I was the younger brother who lived in his shadow. I wasn't bad at things. I just wasn't as good as Damien. I got BS while he got S. I made the junior varsity team while he made varsity. I had a few friends while he was homecoming king. My parents never said they loved him more, but they didn't have to. It was obvious in every interaction. When Damien got into Yale, my parents threw a huge party. When I got into a state school, they said, "That's nice, honey." When Damien graduated with honors and got a job at a prestigious consulting firm, they framed his diploma and hung it in the living room. When I graduated and started working odd jobs, they asked when I was going to get a real career. By the time I was 25, I'd accepted my role as the family disappointment. Damien followed the traditional path to success. Good education, corporate jobs, steady promotions. By 30, he was making 6 figures as a senior consultant. He bought a house in an upscale suburb, married a woman from a wealthy family, and had 2 kids. He drove a luxury car and took expensive vacations. My parents couldn't stop bragging about him. At every family dinner, they'd ask Damien about his latest project, his recent promotion, his investment strategies. Then they'd turn to me and ask, with barely concealed disappointment, "And what are you doing these days?" What I was doing was learning real estate. I'd started small, buying a tiny duplex when I was 23 with money I'd saved from working 3 jobs. I lived in one unit and rented out the other. The rental income covered most of my mortgage. I realized I'd stumbled onto something powerful. Instead of spending money on an expensive apartment, I was building equity. Instead of just earning income from my job, I was earning passive income from my tenant. It was the first time I'd felt smart about money. I became obsessed with real estate. I read every book I could find about investing, property management, and building wealth through rental income. I studied successful investors and analyzed market trends. I spent my evenings looking at properties and running numbers. My family thought I was wasting my time. "Real estate is for rich people," my dad said. "You need money to make money in that game." Damien was more direct. "You think you're going to get rich being a landlord? That's adorable. Real wealth comes from building a career, not collecting rent checks from poor people." I ignored them. I sold my duplex after 2 years for a 30% profit and used the money as a down payment on a small 4-unit apartment building. I managed the property myself, learned to fix things, dealt with difficult tenants, and slowly figured out the business. It wasn't glamorous. I spent weekends fixing leaky faucets and evicting non-paying tenants. But the numbers worked. After paying the mortgage and expenses, I cleared $2,000 a month in profit. That was more than I made at my day job. By the time I was 28, I owned 3 small apartment buildings. I quit my day job and was managing properties full-time. My family was horrified. "You gave up a stable job to be a landlord. my mother asked. What if something goes wrong? What if the market crashes? Damien was less subtle. You're making a huge mistake. You should be building a resume, getting corporate experience, establishing yourself professionally. Instead, you're playing property manager. It's embarrassing. I didn't argue. I just kept working. I refinanced my properties to pull out equity and bought more buildings. I learned to identify undervalued properties, negotiate better deals, and manage renovations. I discovered that many property owners were terrible at management. Buildings were poorly maintained, units were underpriced, and expenses were out of control. If I bought these buildings, cleaned them up, raised the rents to market rates, and managed them efficiently, I could increase their value dramatically. It became my formula. Buy distressed properties, fix them up, improve operations, and either hold them for cash flow or sell them for profit. 30. I had a breakthrough. I'd built a portfolio of 12 properties worth about $8 million with $2 million in equity. Commercial real estate investor reached out to me. He'd heard about my operation and wanted to partner on larger deals. You're good at finding and fixing properties, he said. I have access to capital. Let's work together. We formed a partnership. He brought the money, I brought the expertise. We started acquiring larger apartment complexes, 50-unit buildings instead of 4-unit buildings. The scale changed everything. Instead of managing individual properties, I was managing a portfolio. Instead of doing repairs myself, I hired teams. Instead of finding tenants one at a time, I implemented professional marketing systems. Within 2 years, our partnership controlled 30 apartment buildings with over 900 units. The portfolio was valued at over $200 million. My share of the equity was worth $40 million. At 32, I was wealthier than anyone in my family could imagine. But I didn't tell them. I kept living modestly, driving an old car, and renting a small apartment in one of my buildings. The apartment I lived in was deliberate. It was a 1-bedroom unit in a mid-range building I owned in the city. The rent was $1,500 a month, which I paid to my own company just like any other tenant. Living there served multiple purposes. It let me stay close to my properties and respond quickly to issues. Kept my living expenses low while my wealth grew. And most importantly, it kept my family from knowing the truth. They saw me as the struggling landlord living in a rental apartment. They had no idea I owned the building and 43 others. Damien, meanwhile, had bought his third house. A massive suburban mansion with 6 bedrooms and a pool. He'd taken out a huge mortgage to afford it, but he loved showing it off. At family gatherings, he'd make sure to mention his investment in real estate. Property values in my neighborhood are up 15% this year, he'd say. It's smart to own real estate. Build equity instead of throwing money away on rent. He'd always look at me when he said that last part. The confrontation that started everything happened at our parents' house during Thanksgiving. The whole family was there. My parents, Damien and his wife, our sister and her husband, and me. Damien arrived in his new luxury SUV and immediately started talking about it. Loaded it with every option, he said proudly. Cost more than some people's houses. But I've worked hard. I deserve nice things. Everyone congratulated him. My dad clapped him on the back. My mom took pictures. Then Damien turned to me. What are you driving these days? Still that old Honda? He nodded. It runs fine. Gets me where I need to go. Damien laughed. That's the difference between us. I invest in quality. You settle for adequate. That's why I'm successful and you're still renting an apartment at 32. The room went quiet. My mom looked uncomfortable. My dad changed the subject. But Damien wasn't done. Seriously, when are you going to buy a house? You can't rent forever. It's pathetic. You're throwing away money every month. Meanwhile, I'm building equity and wealth. I could have said something. Could have told him the truth. But I didn't. After dinner, Damien pulled me aside. Look, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm trying to help you. You need to stop playing small-time landlord and get a real job. Build a career. You're wasting your potential. I'm doing fine, I said quietly. Fine isn't good enough, he insisted. You should be doing great. You're smart. You just make terrible decisions. Living in that tiny rental apartment, driving that old car, managing a few small properties. Where's it going? What's your end game? Shrugged. I'm building something. It takes time. Building what? He pressed. A real estate empire. Come on. You own what, 3 or 4 buildings? That's not an empire. That's a hobby. I make more in annual bonuses than you probably make in rent. He had no idea how wrong he was. But I let him think he was right. A week later, Damien called me. Hey, I'm coming into the city for a business meeting next week. Let me stop by your place. I want to see where you're living. My heart rate increased. Why? Because I'm your brother and I care about you. I want to see your living situation. Maybe I can give you some advice on how to improve your life. I knew what this was. Damien wanted to see my pathetic rental apartment so he could feel superior. He wanted to confirm his belief that I was a failure. Part of me wanted to refuse. But another part of me saw an opportunity. Sure, I said. Come by next Tuesday around 7. That week I prepared carefully. I made sure the building looked good but not too nice. I kept my apartment exactly as it was, modest and simple. And I prepared a surprise for my brother that would change everything. Tuesday evening, Damien arrived in his luxury SUV. He parked in the visitor spot and I met him at the entrance. This is it, he said, looking at the building. It's pretty basic. I led him up to my 3rd-floor apartment. He looked around, taking in the small kitchen, the single bedroom, the modest furniture. This is what you're paying rent for, he asked. How much is this place costing you? $1,500 a month, I said. He shook his head. You're paying $18,000 a year for this. Over 10 years, that's $180,000 gone. Just vanished. No equity. No investment. Just money down the drain. It meets my needs, I said. Damien walked to the window and looked out. Where's your building? The one you manage. Which one? Asked casually. He turned. What do you mean which one? How many do you manage? A few, I said vaguely. Show me one. I want to see what you're spending your time on. I pulled out my phone and opened an app. I use this to manage all the properties. It tracks occupancy, maintenance requests, rent collection, everything. Damien glanced at the screen. Then he looked closer. Wait, how many properties are in this app? All of them, I said. He grabbed my phone and started scrolling. I watched his face change as he went through the list. First confusion, then disbelief, then shock. This shows 44 buildings. Is this a demo account or something? No, I said calmly. Those are my properties. Damien stared at me. Your properties. You own 44 buildings. Well, I own or co-own them. Some are 100% mine. Others I own through partnerships. But yes, I control 44 apartment buildings in this city. He looked at the phone again, scrolling faster now. These unit counts. This one has 60 units. This one has 90. This one has 120. He looked up at me, his face pale. How many units do you own in total? 1,237 rental units, I said. Across 44 buildings. Most are in this city, but I have properties in 3 other states too. Damien sat down heavily on my couch. That's not possible. How could you afford to buy 1,200 apartments? I didn't buy them all at once, I explained. I started with one duplex 10 years ago. Used the profit to buy another property. Then another. I leveraged equity, refinanced strategically, and scaled up over time. About 3 years ago, I partnered with an investor who had access to more capital. That's when we really accelerated. But the cost, Damien said. His voice was shaky. 1,200 units. The value must be. He trailed off, doing math in his head. The portfolio is currently valued at about $750 million, I said quietly. I own 30% outright and have partnership stakes in the rest. My personal net worth is approximately $225 million. Complete silence. Damien stared at me like I'd just told him I was from another planet. 225 million, he repeated. You have $225 million. Give or take, depending on market valuations, I confirmed. Damien stood up, walked to the window, then turned back to me. This doesn't make sense. You live in this tiny apartment. You drive an old car. You dress like you shop at thrift stores. I live modestly because it makes financial sense, I explained. Why would I spend money on an expensive house or fancy car? That's depreciating consumption. I'd rather invest capital into properties that generate income. This apartment costs me $1,500 a month. The mortgage on a house like yours would cost $5,000 a month. That's $42,000 a year I can invest elsewhere. But you're a millionaire, Damien said. Hundreds of times over. You could afford anything. Affording something doesn't mean it's a smart purchase, I replied. The wealthy stay wealthy by spending less than they earn and investing the difference. Lifestyle inflation destroys wealth. I'd rather live like a renter and invest like an owner. Damien sat back down. He looked shaken. Does anyone know? Mom and Dad. Our sister. No, I said. You're the first family member I've told. Why? He asked. Why keep it secret? Because it allowed me to focus on building without criticism or pressure. If I'd told the family 10 years ago that I was buying rental properties, everyone would have had opinions. Everyone would have told me why it wouldn't work. This way, I could just build in peace. Damien was quiet for a long time. Then he said, So when I was telling you that you were wasting your life, that you were pathetic for renting, that you'd never build wealth as a landlord, you already had a $200 million real estate portfolio? Not quite $200 million at that time, I said. But yes, essentially. He put his head in his hands. I feel like an idiot. You didn't know, I said. I specifically made sure you didn't know. Why? He asked, looking up. Why let me talk to you like that? Why let me think I was more successful than you? I thought carefully before answering. Because you needed to believe you were winning. Your entire identity is built on being the successful brother, the one mom and dad are proud of, the one who has it all figured out. If I'd threatened that identity years ago, it would have caused problems. So I'll let you have it. Damien flinched. That's pretty brutal. Is it? Yes. You've spent our entire lives putting me down. Making sure everyone knew you were better, smarter, more successful. I just let you keep believing it while I built something real. So this is revenge? He asked quietly. You're punishing me for being arrogant. This isn't revenge, I said. I didn't build a real estate empire to spite you. I built it because I wanted financial freedom and I found something I was good at. The fact that you spent years mocking me while I did it isn't why I succeeded. It's just ironic. Damien looked around my small apartment. I called this pathetic. I said you were throwing money away. And you own the building. I own the building and 43 others in the city, I corrected. This building generates about $30,000 a month in profit. So yes, I pay myself $1,500 in rent while making $30,000 from the property. It's a decent return on investment. He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. All those family dinners where I talked about my career success, my house, my investments. And you just sat there, knowing you were worth 100 times more than me. 200 times more actually, I said. You're worth about $1 million, right? House equity, retirement accounts, maybe some stocks. I'm worth 225 million. So 225 times more. Damien looked at me differently now. Like he was seeing me for the first time. You've changed. You're not the little brother I remember. You're harder. More calculating. I'm the same person, I said. I just stopped letting you define who I am. Damien stood up to leave. At the door he turned back. Are you going to tell Mom and Dad? Eventually, I said. But not yet. I'm not ready for that conversation. Why not? Don't you want them to know you succeeded? Shrug. Their approval doesn't matter to me anymore. I spent 25 years trying to earn it and failing. Then I spent 7 years building wealth without it. I learned I don't need it. He nodded slowly. What about me? Do you want me to keep this secret? I'd prefer if you didn't tell anyone yet, I said. But I can't control what you do. If you need to tell people to process this, I understand. Damien left without another word. I stood at the window and watched him drive away in his luxury SUV. He'd come to my apartment to feel superior, to confirm his belief that he was the successful brother and I was the failure. Instead, he'd discovered the truth. I felt oddly empty. I'd imagined this moment for years. The moment when Damien realized I'd surpassed him. I thought it would feel triumphant. Instead, it just felt sad. We'd wasted so much time on a competition that didn't matter. I'd built wealth, but at the cost of family closeness. Was that trade-off worth it? 3 days later, Damien called me. Can we talk? In person. We met at a coffee shop near his office. He looked tired. We sat down, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Finally, Damien said, I haven't told anyone about your money. I thought about it, but it's not my story to tell. Thank you, I said. I've been thinking a lot since Tuesday, he continued. About our relationship. About how I've treated you. About why I felt the need to put you down constantly. Waited. I think I was jealous, he admitted. Which sounds insane now, but it's true. You were always more creative, more willing to take risks, more comfortable being different. I was the rule follower. Safe choice. The one who did everything right. And I needed that to mean something. I needed to be the successful one because that's all I had. You have a lot more than that, I said. You have a family, career, a life you built. A life built on debt and appearances, he said bitterly. Do you know how much I owe? The mortgage on my house is $600,000. I have car payments, credit cards, and a home equity line. I make good money, but I spend more than I earn trying to maintain an image. I didn't say anything. Meanwhile, you're worth $200 million and you drive a 15-year-old Honda. The car gets me where I need to go, I said. That's the difference between us. You care what people think. I care what works. Damien nodded. I get that now. I spent our whole lives competing with you. And the crazy thing is, you weren't even competing back. You were just doing your thing. I was competing at first, I admitted. When we were younger, I wanted to beat you so badly. I wanted to prove I was just as good. But eventually I realized I was competing in the wrong game. You were trying to impress other people. I just wanted to build something that worked. Once I figured that out, the competition stopped mattering. When did you realize you'd surpassed me? He asked. Financially, I mean. Thought about it. Probably around age 29. That's when my net worth passed $1 million. I knew you were worth maybe half that at the time, mostly in home equity. So mathematically I'd passed you. But it didn't feel like winning. It just felt like progress. Damien smiled sadly. You know what's funny? I've spent the last 3 days trying to figure out how to catch up to you. Like this is still a race. Then I realized I don't want to catch up. I want to understand how you think. Over the next few months, Damien and I had dozens of conversations about money, investing and building wealth. I explained my strategy. Buy undervalued properties, improve operations, increase cash flow, and leverage equity to acquire more assets. He was fascinated by the business model. So you don't actually use much of your own money? He asked during one lunch meeting. Not anymore, I explained. When I started, yes. I saved every dollar, worked multiple jobs, and scraped together down payments. But once I had equity in several properties, I could refinance them and use that money for new acquisitions. Other people's money, specifically bank money, funds most of my purchases now. That's leveraging, he said. Right. I control assets worth $750 million, but I only had to put in maybe $20 million of actual capital over 10 years. The rest is financed by banks who are happy to lend against the properties because they generate predictable income. What about risk? Damien asked. What if the market crashes? What if your properties lose value? That's where cash flow matters, I said. I don't invest in properties hoping they'll appreciate. I invest in properties that generate positive cash flow from day one. If values drop, I'm not worried because the rent checks keep coming. Damien started asking if he could invest with me. I don't have much liquid capital, but I could sell some stocks, maybe take out a home equity loan. Could I be a partner on your next deal? I hesitated. I don't know if that's a good idea. Mixing family and business can get complicated. I know, he said. But I want to learn. I want to stop chasing a lifestyle and start building real wealth. You're the only person I know who's actually done it. After thinking it over, I agreed to let him invest $50,000 in a small syndication deal. It was a 20-unit apartment building I was buying with 2 other partners. His $50,000 would give him a 5% stake. This is a long-term hold, I explained. We'll renovate the building, increase rents, improve operations, and hold it for at least 5 years. You'll get quarterly distributions from the cash flow, probably around 8% annual return. When we eventually sell, you'll get your share of the profit. 8% beats the stock market, Damien said. And I'll learn how this actually works. The deal closed, and Damien became a real estate investor. His first quarterly distribution check was $1,000. He called me excited. I made $1,000 just from owning a piece of property. The shift in Damien's perception was immediate and profound when I finally offered him a glimpse behind the curtain. Welcome to passive income, I stated simply. That's what I've spent a decade building. Thousands of dollars flowing in every month, regardless of whether I lift a finger. This revelation was an emotional catalyst for my brother. He stopped obsessing over his luxury SUV and started poring over books on real estate. His vocabulary traded consumerism for financial metrics, focusing on cap rates, cash-on-cash returns, and market analysis. The years of resentment and competition, which had defined our relationship, were suddenly replaced by genuine curiosity. The change was unmistakable at the next family gathering. Instead of the usual condescending bragging, Damien became my unlikely advocate. When my father inquired about my life, Damien intervened immediately. He's building something truly interesting in real estate, he announced. You should ask him about it. My parents, accustomed to viewing me as the underachiever compared to Damien's corporate success, turned to me with surprise. The moment had arrived. I've been investing in apartment buildings for the past 10 years, I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. I started small, but I've scaled up significantly. I now own or co-own over 1,200 rental units across multiple states. A deep, impactful silence fell over the table. My sister dropped her fork. Her husband sat stunned. 1,200 units, my father echoed, disbelief heavy in his tone. My mother followed up with the question everyone was thinking. What is it worth? I took a deliberate breath. The total portfolio value is approximately $750 million. My personal stake in that portfolio is worth around $225 million. The ensuing silence was staggering. My parents stared as if I were a stranger. My mother's voice was faint as she confirmed the figure. You're telling us you're worth $225 million? Yes, I confirmed. The confusion quickly turned to scrutiny. But you rent a small apartment. You drive an old car. How is that possible? My dad demanded. I live below my means and invest the difference, I calmly explained. Renting strategically allows me to deploy capital into income-generating properties. It's a deliberate choice, not a necessity. My sister finally voiced the family's frustration. Why didn't you tell us? Why let us assume you were struggling? I gently countered. I wasn't struggling. You all assumed I was because I lived modestly. I never misled anyone. You simply misread my lifestyle. Later that evening, my father approached me privately. I need to apologize, he said, surprising me deeply. For all those years we compared you to your brother and made you feel inadequate. You were building something incredible, and we couldn't see it because we were fixated on traditional, superficial markers of success. He struggled with the realization that he had spent decades treating his multimillionaire son like a disappointment. When he asked if their doubt had been the engine for my success, I admitted the truth. I don't know. Maybe being underestimated was an advantage. People don't see you coming when they assume you're not a threat. The dynamics of my family shifted entirely over the next year. My parents began asking me about business, and my sister sought investment advice. The most profound transformation was in Damien. Our rivalry had evolved into a partnership. He invested in my deals, sold his expensive house, and began quietly building his own portfolio. I wasted so much money trying to impress people, he confessed one day. You have a 17-year head start on me. The best time to invest was 20 years ago, I told him. The second best time is today. You're starting today, and that's what matters. 6 months later, Damien quit his corporate job, financially free thanks to his passive real estate income. Last month I made a final announcement. The portfolio had crossed the $1 billion valuation mark, and my personal net worth had recently passed $350 million. The reaction was less shock, more celebratory understanding. Standing with Damien later, looking at the stars, he asked if I regretted the years of toxic competition. Sometimes, I admitted. But it pushed both of us. You challenged me and now we're here, building something together. Perhaps it worked out exactly as it was meant to. I, Felix Brennan, am 37 years old. I still drive an older car and rent a small apartment. But now my family understands and respects the strategy. Damien is now building his own future, no longer trying to catch me, but simply building the best life he can. The greatest victory wasn't proving my critics, including my brother, wrong. It was building something I loved, realizing that their opinions were never the point. Let people underestimate you. It is the most powerful, quiet advantage in the world. Tab the banner to subscribe for more.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoy watching Karma, Payback, come full circle every week, we dive into tales of betrayal and poetic justice. Don't miss the next one. Tap the subscribe button and join the Revenge Squad.